Chapter 35. Joe presented himself as an ordinary man in most respects. Aged around 30, he possessed a slight build with wiry, well-defined muscles and a visage adorned with classical Chinese features, save for one notable exception, his prominent nose. This distinguishing feature wasn't the result of a genetic anomaly, but rather a childhood injury that led to a severe infection, causing his nose to swell significantly. Although it eventually subsided, it never quite regained the typical flat, refined shape seen in his peers. Despite his parents' earnest attempts to find him a wife, Joe's unconventional appearance proved to be a barrier. His nose, deemed unattractive, hindered his prospects, and his solitary nature further distanced him from others. Preferring the company of birds to humans, he found solace in nature but struggled to form meaningful connections with people. Love remained an enigmatic concept, perpetually beyond his grasp, akin to the elusive qualities of mercury or wind. In a small rural village like his own, loners were typically ostracized, condemned to a solitary existence that often ended in lonely deaths, bereft of family or companionship. Joe, however, wasn't averse to human company. Rather, his affinity for nature eclipsed his desire for human connection. His devotion lay with the natural world, not with his fellow villagers. Despite his intellectual prowess, he graduated with top honors from secondary school. Joe's educational opportunities were limited by the resources of his small village. With teachers who, though dedicated, lacked the renown of their urban counterparts, Joe's academic achievements went unnoticed, and the prospect of attending a university in the city seemed out of reach. Yet, amidst the rustic charm of his schooling, beneath the canopy of cypress trees, Joe found solace and inspiration, nurturing his innate love for the world around him. As a young child, Joe had a habit of bringing home injured creatures of all kinds: baby birds fallen from nests, insects of various species, frogs, and even fish. One memorable occasion involved an injured fox, its paw caught in a trap, barely able to move. Starved and weak, the fox had been unable to hunt, surviving on the brink of starvation. It took Joe several days to earn the fox's trust, enough to accept food from his hands. Within a week, the fox felt safe enough to curl up and sleep in Joe's lap. Joe was a complex individual who was far more multifaceted than most realized. He possessed a profound empathy for all living beings, seeing the intricate web of life's connections at its core. Despite his facial deformity, which marked him as different, Joe was never underestimated. Among his peers, he was known for his intelligence and education, yet his status as a dreamer posed challenges, particularly in matters of marriage. Maintaining steady employment was a struggle for Joe, as was forging a career. Dreamers like him were not confined by practicality. Their minds roamed beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom, envisioning grand schemes akin to architects rather than laborers. Driven by his dreams, Joe aspired to establish an animal sanctuary and offer veterinary care to the creatures within. While lacking the means for formal veterinary training, he turned to a local library, immersing himself in books on the subject. He devoured their contents, committing veterinary procedures to memory through relentless study. One who was walking the beach as he often did when Joe spotted him. Joe waved his hand to catch one whose eye and see if he would like company on his morning walk. One who smiled and nodded.
You can come along if you want. The shoreline feels good on my bare feet.
He looked down at Joe's shoes.
You should remove those.
Joe took off his shoes, somewhat clumsily, and then tied their laces together, slinging them over his shoulder. The two of them began walking, Joe adjusting his pace to keep up with One Who. Joe stole a quick glance at One Who and spoke first.
How are you doing?
You mean with my grief?
Joe nodded.
Physically, I'm okay.
One who said, his voice confessional in tone.
Mentally, I'm getting better. Emotionally, I'm devastated. Spiritually, I don't know, and I'm not sure that I even care.
I've never heard anyone respond that way before.
Joe admitted, watching the waves break beyond the bay.
Do werewolves mate for life?
Yeah,
Why?
we live in tribes, and our ancestry is long-lived and thrives in us. I'm supposed to be my grandfather, and he was supposed to be his grandfather, and so on, right to the beginning of werewolves roaming this planet. My dear wife was the very same in her ancestral line, and so we not only mate for life, we often mate for lives.
And you know this.
Joe asked, doubt filling his tone.
We believe this, and yes, we know it. We just can't prove it.
Well, that's true of a lot of things, isn't it?
One who smiled.
It's certainly true for the important ones.
One who turned to Joe.
Were you mated in your previous life, the one before you came here?
No.
Why not?
I never found the right girl, I guess.
How many of you are there on your planet?
Billions.
And you never found a mate?
One who exclaimed, his voice echoing with surprise against the backdrop of the shore. He paused, stooping to collect some sand from the beach, his hands a juxtaposition of fur and calloused skin.
Look at these grains of sand. There must be 1,000 grains in my hand, and each of these is just bits of rock, quite possibly the same rock, broken down into small pieces. Sometimes it's hard to find just one grain that calls to you. Is that why you weren't mated? No one called to you? No one stood out?
Joe blinked slowly, considering the analogy, then lowered his gaze to one whose hand, selecting a single grain with a distinctive amber hue.
I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't stand out, or maybe I didn't want to be distracted by a woman.
One who chuckled softly.
They are distractions. There is no doubt about that, but mostly in a good way. My mate was my partner in every sense of the word. I couldn't imagine living life without her. And now, I have no choice. The sea dragons and their unholy greed for land caused her death. With war looming, I wonder if mine is hours or days away.
And you want to be reunited?
Joe inquired cautiously, sensing the gravity of the topic.
I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to persist alone, to experience aloneness, to find out what a partnerless life would be like. I have always had partners. My mother, my father, my siblings, my mate. Maybe at this point in my life I need to be just me, no partner, no helper, just me.
I lived like that. I found it to be fine.
Joe remarked.
Yes, but you never knew what true partnership in a mate was. Once you know, it makes living alone a harder proposition.
Perhaps.
Joe faintly agreed, his voice carrying a hint of nostalgia.
But I had partners in animals. I had crows that I took care of, and they me. I had foxes, who were like very small versions of werewolves, I suppose. I had rats that I took care of. All of these animals were partners of sorts, at least to me.
One who nodded thoughtfully.
They all sound like food to me.
He remarked with a chuckle.
I see what you mean. You're one of those who find the sanity of animals to be more magnetic than your own kind.
Joe let the amber grain of sand fall to the beach, its insignificance evident against the vast expanse. A crab-like creature skittered across the white sand, catching Joe's attention. He stooped to have a closer look.
We call them sandwalkers.
One who explained.
They pinch with their claws, quite hard, I might mention, so be careful.
Do you fear the sea dragons?
Joe suddenly asked, as if it were the sole reason for their walk.
I fear pain and suffering for myself and my tribe.
One who admitted solemnly.
The sea dragons are simply the agency of that fear. With their queen by their side, they may be a foe we have never seen before. We hope that you and your fellow travelers can blunt the force of their efforts to take our land. If you can do that, we will prevail. They are slow creatures on land with soft flesh.
But there's sonar. How do you get close enough?
Joe interjected, his curiosity piqued.
We have weapons that can fly through the air.
One who began.
Even beyond the range of their sonar?
Joe pressed on.
We believe so. Why are you asking?
One who inquired, sensing an underlying motive.
It seems that war is inevitable.
Joe mused aloud.
I never understood why people march off to war. It must be the worst feeling. And yet they do it.
And you would not if you had an invading army breathing down on your homeland trying to kill you.
One who challenged.
I don't honestly know.
Joe admitted, his gaze fixed on the sandwalker scurrying into the sea.
For all we know, there is an army of sea dragons right out there watching us, waiting for the right time to attack.
It seems our two dragons are deciding that right now.
One who remarked grimly.
Our best hope is that Obsidian can find a way to reconcile our problems and broker a peace between us and the sea dragons.
The other tribes? Will they help?
Joe inquired, his thoughts drifting to the potential allies.
As I explained to all of you, they will come to our aid if it is required.
One who affirmed.
They are like our reserves. We really don't know what to expect from the sea dragons. All we know is that their sonar is an effective weapon. If our tribe and Obsidian can defeat them, then the other tribes will hold us in high regard. Privileges will be extended to us. Chief among them will be their finest daughters and hunting grounds.
Joe smiled wryly.
So the bounty of war comes with perks?
We'll see.
One who turned around.
Let's go back. All of this talk of war has me suddenly worried, and I want to make sure Hunter and his troops are prepared.
The two creatures moved at a pace that was akin to a slow run for Joe, but he kept up with One who. It was out of the corner of his eyes that Joe saw something in the air. It was a black blur, but he instantly knew it was Obsidian. He was returning from the island of the sea dragons. His magnificence, even when he was simply an ink blot on the canvas of the sky, was undeniable. The two of them stopped to watch his return, mesmerized by his grace as he flew directly to them, hovering above them for an instant before he touched the sand with his feet, folding his massive wings into his body like a puzzle box.
Where are the others?
Obsidian asked with urgency in his voice.
I'm not sure.
One who said.
What happened?
Obsidian narrowed his eyes and lowered his head to their own.
I seem to be mated to the queen.